Okay, good morning, y'all. Today we are on 3.315 or 3.3.15. I always forget that last decimal. It's a section quiz, so I'm just going to answer the questions, and as I answer them, I'll explain why. So let's go ahead. Actually, I want to say the questions might not be in the same order for you, but they should be the same questions. So I would probably watch the video all the way through. It won't take me that long before you even answer the questions. So, which of the following components stores values in short-term memory? Well, uh, short-term memory meaning when you turn the power off, does it stay there? So we know it's not a hard drive. Processor doesn't necessarily store information. And then flash drives, they do store information, but it is a long-term storage kind of thing, even though you shouldn't be using it to save like sensitive, like the last photos of your grandma or anything like that. So the answer is RAM, which stands for random access memory. It's RAM. It stores information for your CPU to use, and when you turn your computer off, it clears it all. All right. Which hardware component processes data? The only thing that really does any processing or data processing in a computer is the CPU, which stands for the Central Processing Unit. Um, these other options store data either temporarily or long term. Which of the following components converts AC to DC? AC standing for alternating current, and DC standing for direct current. Computers cannot use alternating current, just with the way that we need the data to be, or we need direct current for bits and bytes. Um, I see some kind of tricky answers here, and I want to kind of talk about them. So the answer is power supply. I'm going to go ahead and pick that. Capacitors, what they do is they store a charge. Um, right. As a charge builds up, it's like a water balloon. It balloons up and then it releases it all at once, or it can do it a little bit slowly. Surge protectors, those are your power strips that have a fuse built into it. If your house gets struck by by lightning, um, you definitely want to have surge protectors on all your expensive electronics. That'll prevent your devices from getting a surge of electricity, which would burn them out. And a voltage regulator, well, it regulates voltage. It controls the voltage. Um, I don't know if we have a whole ton of these in the computer. I do know that capacitors are in power supplies, and it's part of what converts that alternating current to DC. Um, but I know they're in cars, and I know that for like speaker systems, say a speaker needs 12 volts, or say a speaker needs 5 volts, and your car's battery is likely to be 12 volts. Well, the voltage regulator will help you um, get 5 volts to that speaker. And the power supply is the part in the computer, usually has all the power cables. It's the power supply, and it plugs straight into the wall, and then you screw it into the computer or into the computer case, and all. So it has one cable going straight to the wall power. The normal outlets that when you're a kid, your parents tell you not to stick a fork in. Uh, and then it's a big box, and then out of that box on the other side is a bunch of cables. Usually, um, it just it converts that alternating current to direct current using capacitors. And for my IT students or for anyone who likes to tinker, if there's one thing you ever take from this class, while you're out in the field doing IT work is that you should never ever dig into a power supply. You should never open it up and dig into it. Um, the analogy I like to use, or I guess a metaphor, is that if I were to stick a metal fork into a power outlet, like on the wall, I would probably die. If I were to stick a metal fork and mess around inside of a power supply and it shocked me, I would die. No ifs or buts. Okay, next. Which of the following computer components is the most important part of any modern computer? This is kind of, this goes back to in class, I always say, when you are thinking about computer parts, think about how they support the CPU. The RAM only exists because hard drives are not very quick, and what you want is for your CPU to work as efficiently as possible. Hard drives are relatively slow, relative to the CPU. So what we do is we preload everything onto the RAM for because the RAM is faster for the CPU to manipulate like the data on it. The NIC is the NIC, which stands for Network Interface Card. Anything with networking capabilities, anything that can connect to internet, has a NIC in some form. They're very tiny nowadays, and honestly, they're usually built in. But it is what you find your MAC address on, which is, you know, if you know an IP address, it's kind of similar. Um, but a MAC address is like a specific, hey, this is my computer, or this is this computer, no matter where you go. An IP address can vary um, depending on um, depending on like where you are, or if you like if you switch out your router, you can have a different IP address. And then the BIOS is technically not a physical thing. The BIOS um, is an operating. It's a very very basic operating system. It stands for Basic Input Output System or software. Um, Basically, if you have ever booted and pressed like I think it's always either F12, delete, escape, F1, F2, F3, F4, F5, F6. Um, and basically, what it is it helps you set up your system. That's all it is. Um, Becca is working on a program that will store data. The program will need quick access to data, and data persistence is not important. Where should the data be stored? So, it needs quick access to data, and the data persistence is not important. Where should the data be stored? This is kind of a difficult one. The program will need quick access to data and data persistence. So it's saying that the program will store data, I guess, when Becca opens the program, um, and she needs it quick, like quick on the fly. Um, and the persistence, so the long term storage is not important. So what we needed is probably in memory. Flash memory is a little bit different. Flashing is like read only memory kind of stuff. Um, and then a database is a persistent data storage. Um, I'm going to go ahead and check my answer though. It says in memory. It should be correct. Yes. RAM is much faster than a hard drive. A database is just a server with a bunch of hard drives. Um, Flash memory it's a little bit different. It's that's more of like Like flash memory would be on like a MP3 player. Which of the following should be done before working on hardware in a computer system? Well, you definitely should not make sure it's plugged in because you don't want to electrocute yourself. That'd be really bad. Um, Touch the case frame of the PC system. We'll come back to that. Touch a plastic part of the case. That does nothing to get rid of any electrostatic charges um, because plastic is an insulator. And then it says rub your feet on the carpet. We know that is the opposite of what we want. We don't want to shock the computer parts because you can burn them out that way. No different than a lightning strike coming down and hitting your house, and you don't have the proper grounding for your house, and it shocks your systems. We don't want to shock the system with even just a tiny amount of electricity that can throw things off. And it says touch the case frame of the PC system. Now that's correct because the case is just the box that the computer parts are plugged into, the motherboard, the CPU, the hard drives, everything. You typically have a metal frame on the inside of it, even if the outside is plastic, because, well, you don't want, you really don't want an all plastic computer case. That's just, the parts are expensive. Um, and technically the metal is cheap. But yeah, so the touching the metal should help you discharge anything, any extra electrostatic discharge that you might be carrying. No different than if you rubbed your feet on the carpet and then you touched the doorknob. Which of the following voltages from an ESD discharge would be the minimum to short a computer's hardware components? Honestly, I don't know this. I don't know this. I would think it's actually very little. So I'm going to hit 3.3 volts. I know some parts use 3.3 volts. I'm just going to check my answer here. It's 100 volts. An ESD charge as small as 100 volts can damage a computer's components. 12, 5, or 3.3 are common voltages used for powering components. An ESD charge discharge this small would not hurt a component. Huh. Well, I learned something, and I hope you did too. Um, I do want to speak on this. So, high voltage isn't necessarily deadly. High amperage is not necessarily deadly or strong, quote unquote. Um, the two combined, when you have high voltage, or even let's just say medium voltage and medium amperage, those two multiply. They're multipliers for each other. So if you have a really low voltage and a low amperage, um, right? Let's like relate to this back to the body. The a car battery and um, a car battery and a AA battery have the same amperage and voltage, even though the car battery is huge. But it does store a lot of energy. It just doesn't discharge a lot of it at the same time. So you can touch two ends of a car battery and not die or even really shock yourself. Um, that's something to keep in mind. Now, if anything says high voltage, warning high voltage, it probably does mean that it has high amperage. Um, very Only in very controlled situations are you experiencing high voltage with no amperage or little to no amperage. But I'm not going to drag that on too much. Where are the values the computer is directly working with at a particular moment in time stored? Where are the values the computer is directly working with at a particular moment in time stored? Okay. I want. Okay, so the CPU clock is not the answer. The CPU clock is just the tempo that the CPU is calculating things on. A CPU has to, because it writes so fast, it has to keep the tempo, and if it doesn't, it gets lost. Right, 1 0 1 1 1 0, but like a billion times faster. Um, the hard drive, I know that the computer is pretty much never directly working with hard drive information. Um, and then the RAM and the CPU register. If you haven't read that part, that section for the CPUs and how they work, oh wait, I can pull it up. I'm sharing my entire screen. CPU registers. CPU registers. So there is the ALU, the arithmetic logic unit, and then there's the registers, and the control unit. The registers are going to be where the CPU is working with, because I know I say like we move information from the hard drive to the RAM for the CPU to directly work with. Um, in reality, most of the time the CPU is pulling data from the RAM, but it's pulling data from the RAM and storing it on its registers. I'm pretty sure. Let me go ahead and check my answer. Yes. Um, the RAM is able to keep up, but the RAM basically is all that information is preloaded. The CPU pulls it into the register for it to work with. Think of it like you work at a factory that has its own warehouse. The parts that you need to work with are in the warehouse portion, but that warehouse portion is like the hard drive, right? It's got billions of those parts that you need to work with, billions of those bolts you need to work with. Um, and as a factory worker, well, you got to work with that stuff. So what they do is they bring like enough for you to work with for that shift into your station. It'll probably be on a shelf or something, and you grab it, right? That shelf is going to be like the RAM, like it's there for you to work with, and then your CPU register as a factory worker is going to be whatever is on your hands, whatever is in your hands or on your workbench, work desk. That's the best way I can describe it. Okay, which of the following companies is a manufacturer of CPUs? Um, we have NVIDIA, we have Hewlett Packard, Intel, and Dell. NVIDIA specializes in graphics cards. Um, graphics cards typically are denoted by um, a blank, I think it's blank 40, no wait, XX50, XX60, XX 70, 80, and 90. So where the current generation is 50, a 5060, a 5090, a 5080. Um, just something to like think about, like Google. Here, I'll show you. NVIDIA 5080. Right here, $1,000. Goodness. Current generation. And we know with tech, the bigger the number, the better. Generally. Hewlett Packard, they make laptops and desktops, but they don't make CPUs. The answer is Intel. And Dell is the same as Hewlett Packard. They make laptops and desktops. But Intel is not a laptop manufacturer. They make purely chips. And recently, and very recently, in terms of tech, they have not switched over, they've added on the manufacturing of graphics cards. Intel. I'll look this up for you. Products. So they have processors. I guess they do have systems. They make network chips too, and they also FPGAs. Wow, they don't even list their GPUs. Intel Arc Celestial GPUs may feature GDDR7. But basically, you should know that the two major CPU manufacturers are Intel and AMD. Sorry, my bird is kind of killing me. Okay. Which CPU type would most likely be found in a smartphone? I don't know how up to date this was. I think phone manufacturers widely switched to 64-bit when I was in like freshman year. iPhones Apple kind of started doing it first. Um, and ironically, they didn't take advantage of it, but it did pave the way. Um, I would say um, ARM or 64-bit. I honestly don't know what IA64 is. ARM, what it is it is a RISC. Put RISC V CPU. RISC RISC CPU. And what it is it's harder to program a RISC processor. It needs more direct and let's say it needs more direct instructions. Um, like x86 and x64, which is 32-bit and 64-bit respectively. Um, they Their processors can take general commands or instructions, and the CPU is able to pull through. The ARM will be confused. It needs to be told exactly what to do, which means it needs more development time. I'm going to check this answer. Yes, ARM. ARM processors use reduced instruction set, which means they can't do as many things as x86 can. x86 are 32-bit, x64 are 64-bit, and IA64 processors with special CPUs only used in servers. That's interesting. Let's go ahead and score it. I missed one. I know that for sure. It's teasing me. Come on. Yes. I got a 90. I missed that one. Why is it taking so long to load? But yes, if you have any questions about that, please email me. You all should have my email.